Final Destination is a movie that came out in the year 2000. The script for Final Destination was originally meant to be an episode of The X-Files, but it was rejected and instead turned into, if you ask me, decent film. Don't get me wrong, it's a genius idea and setup, but with a passable execution. But despite what I might think, Final Destination was followed up with a sequel in 2003. In 2006 we got Final Destination 3, and not knowing when enough is enough, New Line Cinema decided to turn it into a franchise with 2009's The Final Destination. Which, just a quick little side note here, it always really bothers me when they decide to name a sequel, not the next number. James Rolfe brought this to my attention with a video he posted back in like 2006, and it's honestly bothered me ever since. A good example of this that James mentions is Rambo. So the first Rambo film is called First Blood. The second one is called Rambo: First Blood Part 2. And the third one is called Rambo 3, which is like, hold up, there is no Rambo 2. There's First Blood and Rambo First Blood Part 2, but there's no Rambo 2. And even wilder is that a few years later they released the next one, which they decided to just call Rambo. That means that now if you say, hey, have you seen Rambo? You're talking about the fourth installment of the series. Same thing goes for Alien, Aliens, Alien 3. Don't do that. Don't call it Alien 3 if there's no Alien 2. Call it something else. Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters 2. Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters Afterlife. Ghostbusters Afterlife 2. And this one Ghostbusters movie got heavily critiqued by a bunch of basement-dwelling Reddit mods with Oedipus complex. But, you know, obviously, fuck that. Just name the thing in a way that makes sense. That's all. Okay. Back to Final Destination. Followed by Final Destination 5 in 2011, and apparently a sixth one is on the way as we speak. So the basic gist of all the Final Destination movies is basically the same. A group of people find themselves in a seemingly ordinary situation until it turns very deadly, killing all of them. We watch them all die, except, oh no, they didn't die, that was all just a premonition by the main character. So everything went a lot better than expected. These people were gonna die, but then they didn't, so after this they just live happily ever after, except no! Because Death is not a fan of that. Basically, it seems like the way that Death operates is that he has this list. I guess it's a list of like names of the people who are gonna die today, and if your name is on that list, Death is pretty dead set, no pun intended, on making you die today. But now that the opportunity has passed, Death has to retort to the most convoluted ways to still get ya, and also he does it in the order that you were supposed to die originally. And yeah, that's the whole basic premise. So now that we're all on the same page about the basic premise, there's some stuff I'd like to investigate a little bit further. You see, after the first couple of weird deaths in these movies, the main gang of characters usually figure out that they're on this death list. This naturally leads to the characters trying their best to get off this list and survive by any means necessary. And from what I remember seeing some of these films as a kid, this part always kind of confused me. Not the wanting to survive part, I think that comes pretty naturally, but rather the way the sequence of events start playing out because they are messing with Death's list. It feels inconsistent. Not that consistency or continuity really matters. I don't think this is a franchise that's meant to be put under that sort of like continuity scrutiny, but it still left me wondering through all these years, how exactly did Death operate? Was there a way to get off his list once you've ended up on it? Well, it turns out that with the magic of the internet, I don't have to go all the way down to the video store to get the tapes anymore. I can just watch the movies right here. So that's what I did. I sat my ass down and I watched through all 5 of the Final Destination movies, taking close notes on all the little pieces of lore that pop up, to hopefully finally, once and for all, figure out exactly how it works. So, there's 3 main questions I want to have answered at the end of this video. Number 1, can you get off the list once you're on it? Number 2, how more specifically does Death operate? For example, what happens if someone saves you from death once you're on this list, effectively saving you for a second time if you count the premonition as being the first time? And number 3, and this is a bit of a bonus question really, but since we're here watching all these movies anyway, we might as well answer, are these films any good? So let's get to work. I won't be describing every single plot element of all of these films. Rather, I'll be summarizing what I consider to be the more important bits, and of course all of the death scenes, because of course I'll do that, that's its Final Destination. But I will be skipping over like big chunks of drama and story that ends up not really mattering. And therefore, if it wasn't abundantly clear, spoiler alert! Even though I won't describe every single element of these films, you will be walking away from this video knowing who dies, how they die, in what order they die, and how the film ends. Cool, so with that out of the way, let's get started with the first Final Destination. Content warning, blood, death, I guess some like cartoony CGI gore, that sort of thing. Okay. This is Alex. Him and his classmates are boarding flight 180 headed towards Paris. They get on the plane and everything is good until the plane explodes and all of them die, but oh sheesh y'all, it was a dream. Alex is obviously confused as to what's going on, but decides that the best course of action here is probably to get off the plane, and he tries to get everyone else to come with him. Most won't listen, but some do. Those people being Todd, Terry, their teacher Miss Luton, Carter, Billy, Alex, and Clear Rivers. Yeah, that's her name. Clear Rivers. Not Claire. This is not a pronunciation thing. Her name is Clear Rivers, okay? Okay. Now I'm just gonna move this over here. So this is a list of the people... Actually, surprise, new camera angle. These are the people that are gonna die in this movie, and this is also the order they're gonna die in. This is the order they died in on the plane. Cool? Cool. So let's get to the first death scene. Todd. Todd is in the bathroom about to give his already very smooth face a shave, but he accidentally cuts his face. He decides to instead start trimming his nose hairs. At the same time, the toilet is leaking a very blue liquid that travels across the floor of the room. At the same time as this, Alex is doing some shit in his room and accidentally shreds a magazine on the world's sharpest fan, followed by a confetti rain of little pieces of magazine, but a small piece of paper lands in front of him with the name Todd on it. This is a sign from death, but we'll return to that a bit later. Now, back to Todd, who slips while doing laundry or something, and the laundry wire that he uses to hang his clothes on wraps around his neck. Shampoo has also made the bathtub very slippery, so his feet can't get a grip, and Todd is now dead. Rest in peace. That's how you'll know someone's dead. The very next day, Alex and Clear Rivers decide to do the most rational thing that anyone would do following the apparent suicide of their classmate after a traumatic event: break into the morgue to see his body. At the morgue, they get caught by the mortician, who tells them that you were probably supposed to die on that plane, and since you didn't, death is probably out to get you now. Alex and this guy Carter has a fight about something inconsequential, and this girl Terry walks in front of a bus. Rest in peace. Terry was a girl, right? Isn't that a man's name? Hopefully I remember correctly, and that's a girl. Alex then figures out that everyone is dying in the same order that they were supposed to die on the plane. So therefore next up is their teacher, Mrs. Luton. Her coffee mug cracks from temperature changes, and she leaves a trail of alcohol from her kitchen all the way to her computer. That same alcohol then drips into the computer, short-circuiting something so that the monitor explodes and launches a huge shard of glass just straight into her neck. The trail of alcohol from her mug now catches fire and sets her entire kitchen ablaze. A knife then falls into her chest, after which the oven explodes, knocking over a chair that hits the knife and drives it into her heart. Rest in peace, Miss Luton. Might as well prepare this next strip as we are going. As you can see, next up is Carter. And this is the first point in the franchise where we'll start to see some of Death's more intricate methodology, because Carter is stuck in his car on a train track. He is then saved last minute by Alex. The train does, however, hit a shard of metal that flings through the air and cuts the head off of Billy. And believe me, we will talk about what just happened here, but for now, let's just move on. After the death of Billy, Alex, who knows the order of all the deaths, assumed that now Carter must be safe, that death just skipped him because it killed Billy. Again, just play along for now and we'll get back to it. This now means that Alex is next on the list, but hold on a second. Alex just remembered that Claire died before him in his premonition. So let's just quickly rearrange these. Claire is now stuck in a car, a bit of a running theme in this one, but as long as she stays in it, she's safe, because there's a bunch of water and electricity going on outside, but you know, the car keeps her safe. Alex, however, thinks back to Carter and Billy, remembering what happened to them, and realizes that if he kills himself now, he'll be saving Clear Rivers. So he grabs onto a bunch of electricity and dies. Except he doesn't, because he miraculously somehow survives. And we've now reached the end of the movie and it's time for an epilogue, something that you'll learn happens in every single Final Destination movie. 6 months has passed and the trio of Alex, Carter, and Clear Rivers goes to Paris together to, I guess, celebrate that they made it out alive. I don't know why you would go to Paris in this scenario if that's how literally all of your classmates died. Like, go anywhere else, but they go there. They sit at some cafe talking about how happy they are to be alive, and I just want to clarify the reasoning of these characters. Their logic goes like this: if death wants to kill you, but something interferes and saves you, you're good, and death just moves on. This, of course, makes absolutely zero sense, as the whole entire premise of this movie is that you escaped death, so now death is coming for you, because you are not supposed to escape him. So why would death just let you go when you escape him a second time? But to be fair, what happened with Carter and Billy and Claire and Alex is, I guess, some sort of indication that that could be true, even though I still think it makes very little sense, especially since Alex didn't even die, but I digress. As they're sitting there, suddenly Alex starts seeing these weird, spooky signs everywhere that we've learned throughout the movie indicate that death is probably imminent. Alex, being convinced that for some reason he is next to go, even though Carter originally should go before him, being earlier on the list, gets up from the table and walks away to, like, make sure to keep a safe distance from the others, but Carter gets up and goes after him. And then a huge neon sign falls down from a building and crushes Carter in front of Clear Rivers and Alex, and he dies. Rip in peace. The end. So walking out of the first Final Destination movie, what do we know? Well, first of all, let's start keeping track of death's rules. The first one being the most obvious one: if you cheat death, death will come after you. Now, going back to the list of names, we've also learned that if you cheat death a second time, death will skip to the next person on the list, but will then circle back to you before moving on. I draw this conclusion because Carter was saved, then Billy died, and now that they're in Paris, Carter was the first to die. But I mean, in between there, Claire was in her car and there were a bunch of like really convoluted things kinda actively trying to kill her, but that could just have been one hell of a coincidence, and death wasn't actually out for her, it was waiting for an opportunity to get Carter. That's at least what we have to assume. Furthermore, taking all of this into account, we can assume that what happened after the credits roll was that somehow Clear Rivers died, and that was followed by Alex dying. Right? And lastly, I know I just mentioned him in passing, but this dude, that's death. Or like, at least he's in cahoots with death. That's gotta be death. Is it death? You can tell me. It's death, right? Well, good job. You did it. That's the first Final Destination, and so far, this doesn't really seem very complicated. Death has a list. If someone on the list gets skipped, Death just moves on to the next person and then circles back to get the one he missed. And yeah, it pretty much seems that if you're on the list, you're fucked. And that's it. There's no way to get away from death. That's what the whole ending implies. So, cool. That makes sense. Let's move on to the second one. Now that you know how these movies work, let's not waste any time. Exactly 1 year after the events of Final Destination 1, a girl named Kimberly experiences a huge traffic accident. Boom, crash, pow, and then it was all just a vision. She steps out of her car screaming, saves a bunch of people, and now they're all on death's list. Now, in the last one, there were a bit too many names for my liking. It's hard to keep track and keep all that very useless information in your head. So for this one, I've given most of them cute little nicknames. So here's all the names, and this is also the order that they die. We've got the cop, Mr. Motorcycle, Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, Business Lady, Mom and Son, I'm gonna count those as just one, Mr. Cool, Kimberly, and Kimberly's friends. Now, immediately, Kimberly's friends all step out of the car and dies, but Kimberly gets saved by the cop. Well, we then cut to Mr. Cool, who manages to lose a ring down a drain, get his hand stuck, and also start a fire in his apartment. Luckily, however, he manages to get out of the apartment and climb down the fire escape ladder before he slips on literal spaghetti and then gets a ladder straight through his head. Well, I, for one, am starting to sense a pattern. How about you? Now, Kimberly finds out that Clear Rivers is still alive, and believe me, I have thoughts on this, but we'll get back to it. Kimberly finds Clear, who explains that everyone will die in the order that they died in the premonition. Kimberly, however, is quick to point out that that doesn't make any sense because her friends were supposed to die last and they died first, and aha, in the sequel, death goes backwards. Meaning that the list should look this. Now, a couple of things I want to point out about this. Number one, if we're going by the logic of the first film, Death should, now that he's killed off Mr. Cool, circle back to Kimberly, because we learned this in the first one with Billy and Carter, and since Kimberly got saved by the cop, but she was supposed to die here, so Death moved on, killed Mr. Cool, and Kimberly should be next. Good. Number two.
Why the fuck is Clear Rivers alive?
According to the list in the first movie, she was supposed to die before Alex. I mean, sure, technically I guess she could have saved herself or someone else could have saved her, which would have meant that Death would have skipped ahead on the list and then killed Alex, but it would then have circled back to her. And seeing how she's still alive and that Death is now working backwards, shouldn't her name be here on the list? The only logical explanation for this that I can come up with is that in between every single death, Death first looks to Clear, realizes that he can't get to her because she's locked herself in an insane asylum with like padded walls and she meets no one except she immediately meets Kimberly, but whatever. And then after coming to the conclusion that I can't get Clear right now, he just moves to the next person on the list, and then before moving on to the next one, he checks back. Are you still able to fully avoid me? I guess you are. Let me take out the next one, and then goes back to Clear. So yeah, Death checks in on Clear in between every other death. It's not the cleanest solution, but it's the only one I can come up with that allows for this to make any sort of sense. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, while we're at it, the reason the movie gives to why it's all going backwards now is that, and I quote, Death is tying up loose ends. Okay, yeah, sure. Because that makes sense. Clear is kind of falling off the list here, ironically. But yeah, let's just move on with the movie and keep her up here and just assume that Death checks in on her in between every other death. Okay, if our list is correct, next up should be Mom and Son, unless it checks back with Kimberly, but I have a feeling it won't since she's kind of the main character in this one. So let's see what happens. At the dentist, a fish gets stuck in an exhaust in an aquarium. Water then leaks out and gets electrified through an outlet. It heads towards the mom in the waiting room, but she avoids it at the last second. This power surge or whatever it is also fucks with the electricity that goes to the oxygen machine that is supplying the son with oxygen or with the whatever drugs you Americans use when you go to the dentist, which, by the way, that's not a thing everywhere. You don't get like put under anesthesia for going into a dent. It's wild that you get drugged up on ketamine. Anyway, the oxygen stops flowing to the son, so he starts passing out, just as a plastic fish falls into his mouth and starts suffocating him. Luckily, however, an assistant saves his life in the very last second. Then, walking out of the building, a pane of glass falls from the sky onto the boy and crushes him. Guess I should have divided these up to two separate ones, but it was a bit unclear in what order they died in the premonition, so let's just do that. Clear has now left her cell at the mental institution, maybe the dumbest choice she could have made after learning that history is repeating itself. They go to see the mortician from the first film, if you remember that guy, and he tells them that only new life can beat death. After this, Kimberly gets a new vision. This time she sees herself driving a white van into like a body of water and drowning. At the same time, the cop remembers that there was a pregnant girl at the original pileup. New life must be referring to her baby, but when did she die? I'll put her on the side of the list here for now. Next up on the list is Mom, but before that, Clear very narrowly avoids her death. This could be Death trying to get her before moving on to the next person on the list, which would prove my theory on Death circling back to her in between every death, but who knows? They find the pregnant girl and they put her in jail because they have a cop on their team to like protect her from death, I guess. Shaggy then sees a sign. Specifically, it's a man with hooks. Now, I haven't talked that much about the signs, but in short, before a lot of the deaths in these movies, there are little clues and signs as to how it's gonna happen. Before the kid at the dentist died, Kimberly got signs about birds, and then birds crashed into the window and he was running towards a flock of birds when the pane of glass fell. And in the first film, you might remember the whole thing about the little clipping that said Todd. Those are signs. Now, the fact that I haven't really talked about them is mostly just to save time. This video is going to be long enough as it is, but also because it doesn't really help us understand death. However, it is a rule, so just to be sure, let's put this on here. Death will give signs. Okay, cool. Now back to this side. So, or actually, let me just real quickly point out here that why would Death give you signs if he wants to kill you? To give you a fair chance? Does he really care about that? And also, where was the signs for Billy before his head got like sliced in half? He didn't get a sign. Seems a little inconsistent. Are you noticing a theme yet? Mom and Mr. Motorcycle is sharing an elevator with a man with hooks. She gets a phone call from Kimberly saying that a man with hooks will kill her. Her hair gets stuck on one of the hooks and then her head gets stuck in the elevator door, decapitating her. Rest in pieces. Mr. Motorcycle then tries to kill himself, but the gun just clicks despite being fully loaded. He can't end his own life before it's his turn. New rule alert! You don't die before your turn. Wake up, babe, new contradiction just dropped. Isn't this whole thing about cheating death and fucking up his list? Perhaps there's a difference between postponing and expediting your death? I do not know, but the pregnant girl's water breaks and she gets rushed to the hospital. Meanwhile, the main characters figure out that this isn't the first time that they've all cheated death. They were all meant to die earlier in their lives, but for one reason or another, they didn't, and all because of the events that happened in the first film. Like, for example, Business Lady was going somewhere on a bus that would have killed her if she arrived there, but on the way there, her bus hit Terry in the first one. The cop was supposed to go check out a shootout, but last minute his partner took that and died, while he himself went to check out an accident at a train track, aka Billy getting his head cut off. What this means for us trying to figure out the list and the logic between all of this is a lot. In short, since Business Lady avoided her death around the time where Terry died in the first one, shouldn't she be added to the list like directly after Alex, who was last on the original list, I guess? Or should she have been slotted in between Terry and Miss Luton? And what about all the other passengers on that bus trip, or that were near and around all the other characters that supposedly have cheated death before? Are all of those also gonna die in like extreme freak accidents? Oh, and what about the accident at the beginning of this film? What does that do for Death's list if you're already on Death's list because you cheated your death earlier and then you got saved from your death for a second time? Shouldn't that mean that you're now safe, according to Clear's logic of saying how it skips the people that get saved? Also, why the fuck did she even say that? She saw Carter, and presumably also Alex, die after being saved, so she would know this by now. Why would she tell Kimberly that, like, it skips people and then they're safe? Because she says that. I don't know if I mentioned that, but she says that. Taking all of this into account is honestly such a mind-numbingly huge complication to the logic that for now we'll just have to like not take most of that into account as we move on and see what happens. The van with the pregnant lady almost collides with our main character's car. Mr. Cool is impaled and taken to the hospital. Business Lady gets stuck under a log. A random kid is hanging out at the accident site and almost gets hit by a news van that pulls up, but Shaggy pulls him out of the way at the last second. I'm just gonna put this right here, don't worry about it. The airbags in the car then go off, killing Business Lady, and the cigarette she was smoking lights a bunch of gasoline that blows up a fence, a barbed wire fence that goes straight through Shaggy so that he also dies. Rip to the both of you. The survivors then head off to the hospital and Mr. Motorcycle is there dying in his bed, but the baby from the pregnant lady is being born at the same time, which means, according to the logic of these fucking idiots, that they're safe and everything is good. But uh-oh, hold on a second. Kimberly is just now remembering that pregnant lady was not supposed to be in the original crash at all. So saving her and caring about her has all been in vain, and this baby being born won't really save anyone. Real fucking... You couldn't have thought of that? You couldn't have remembered that fact earlier? Kimberly? I'm personally pissed at Kimberly. Talking to you, Kimberly. Good job. Yeah, nice. Nicely done. So I guess I'll remove pregnant lady from the list. Clear Rivers then goes to check on Mr. Motorcycle, but just as she enters his room, something explodes in there and it kills both Mr. Motorcycle and Clear Rivers. There and there. And to that, I just want to say, what the fuck? Why the fuck did Clear die now? Why not between Business Lady and Shaggy? Why did she survive up to this point in the first place? How am I supposed to make sense of this? It's just, I don't expect like a perfect, flawless, really thought out, deeply rooted lore about how all of this works, right? Because it's popcorn horror, it's supposed to be fun. But like, this is so nonsensical that they could have just gotten rid of the idea of having a list in the first place and just be like, there's no order to it, they all just kind of die and let's see who comes next, you know? Instead, they give you this illusion that there's a logic to it that you're just not able to figure out. But if you sit down and try to figure it out, and believe me, I've tried, it's just nonsense. It's all just nonsense. Okay. Kimberly realizes that new life does not mean baby. It means that she needs to die but be resuscitated, however you say that. So she drives an ambulance into the river. That's what her vision was before. But she gets saved. They resuscitate her. And now everything is good. It's time for the epilogue. Kimberly and the cop is having some sort of barbecue dinner in the backyard of some family. The mom and dad remarks on what a miracle it was that their kid didn't die by that news van. Aha. Just as they say that, they look over at the kid and he just fucking explodes. And like his arm falls onto the table. The end. Okay, so the kid got saved right here, in between mom and business lady. He then got added to the bottom of the list, I suppose. And these two survived because Kimberly died and came back to life, which, by the way, to me just sounds like avoiding your death an extra time, which should mean that you just end up back on the list yet again. But I guess that now they would end up after the kid down here, or the kid is like on a completely separate list over here, and Death wants to finish off this list before getting back to these. And so Death will be coming for them now. Or because of the whole drowning and then coming back to life thing, they might just be completely safe. Who knows? I know. I unfortunately know this. Yeah, in the special Schuster Fate version of the DVD of Final Destination 3, you can see a newspaper article saying that both the cop and Kimberly died in a wood chipper, so yeah. Oof, okay. Final Destination 3. This one takes place at an amusement park. That should be the tagline. Final Destination 3. This one is in an amusement park. Our main character Wendy sees a few weird signs. Does it say change the battery pack? Oh, fuck, I need to... Battery of the camera almost died. Been filming for like 4+ hours. Our main character this time is called Wendy. Now Wendy is at an amusement park with all of her friends, but she sees a bunch of spooky, weird signs. But anyway, she gets on a roller coaster and obviously it breaks down, killing all of her friends and herself. And then we're back and you know how it works. Here are the people that gets off the ride with her and the order in which they die. The nice girls, the really creepy guy named Frankie, the strong man whose only personality trait is liking the gym, Mr. Edgelord Emo, Mrs. Edgelord Emo, Kevin, and Wendy. And that's all. What's that? It looks like I have 2 more notes here? No, really. Don't. It's fine, don't worry about those. Let's just keep watching the movie. First off the list to die are the nice girls, and I just want to say that I didn't name them nice girls as in like...
nice.
They're really nice. They're like the only nice characters. They're super nice to them. Yeah, watch the movie if you want to know what I'm talking about. Anyway, they're at a tanning salon because...
Of course they are. They're bimbos.
And when they're in there, a slushy drips down on some sort of electrical equipment, and we all know what happens when something drips onto electrical equipment in these movies. It becomes stronger. So the heat in the solariums go up way higher than it's supposed to. The owner unfortunately gets locked outside the building, and inside the room a shelf falls down right between their 2 solariums, trapping them inside. Rest in peace, nice girls. I vaguely appreciated your presence. Now, Wendy at home has been looking through her camera and figured out that there are hints to how the deaths will play out in the last photos taken of the people. So, for example, the picture of the nice girls have this kinda, I guess, red glow about it, which naturally is like, oh yeah, so they'll die from heat. I was very tempted to add this as one of the rules, but honestly, this is never brought up again in any of the other films, so I don't even know if it should be considered canon or... It's my video, I'm gonna do it the way I want to do it, and I don't want to put it there because it means nothing, okay? Kevin and Wendy then go to a drive-thru, and then they get locked in place by a truck while some other truck rolls down a hill towards them, and they manage to escape last second, but a big propeller that... I don't even remember where the propeller is. Is there like a boat motor there? I don't remember that. Goes through their car or over their car, and it kills the guy in the car in front of them, and it just so turns out that that's Frankie. They killed him off fast enough for me to not really have anything to say about him, but all of these movies seem to have like one perverted, gross guy for some reason, and this was him in this movie. Kevin and Wendy now realize that there are 2 people on this roller coaster that they haven't accounted for, but they don't know who. Well, we will probably figure that out as we go along. Next up, they go to Strongman to try to save him from dying, and he is naturally in a gym. Strongman tells them that he doesn't believe in this silly theory that death is after them, and as he does, swords on the wall cut off wires that make his workout machine crush his entire head. Rest in peace, Strongman. Swiftly moving along through the list here, next up should be Mr. Emo. So Mr. and Mrs. Emo work in a hardware store for some reason. They doubt that Wendy and Kevin's ideas about death being after them would be true, but Mr. Emo also presents a theory. He's saying that if they are right and that death is in fact after them, they should just kill whoever is last on the list. Because that would apparently make it so that death would skip everyone before that, and then you'd be fine according to him. I don't know what he is basing this information on, but yeah, after this, obviously, a convoluted accident happens to kill Mr. Emo, but actually Kevin saves Mr. Emo. And this is actually, I think, kind of an important moment, because based on what happens now, we might finally find out how this actually works. So let me recap the alternatives as to what can happen based on the available facts of the previous films. Death should either 1. Take Mr. Emo and push him to the end of the list, killing off everyone else before getting to him. 2. Skip ahead and kill Mrs. Emo and then circle back to Mr. Emo to tie up loose ends. Or push him to the end of the list work its way all the way there, and then switch the order to go backwards, because remember that was a thing, and then get him right away. Like, it wouldn't change things, because if he's at the end of the list, he will then be at the first of the list. Yeah, but still. Or alternative number 4, and stick with me with this one. It should kill the next person on the list, in this case Mrs. Emo, and then go back to check on Mr. Emo before going for the next one on the list, just like how it did with Clear. But since this is the second time that Mr. Emo has managed to escape death, it should reverse the list order, and everyone before Mr. Emo is already dead. The remaining people on the list should therefore be safe after Mr. Emo has been killed off. Now that's not gonna happen. First of all, because I've seen the film, but second of all, because why would they be so convoluted? And I mean, does that whole theory make sense? Not really, but it makes more sense than most of what happens in these films. But let's see how they do it. After Mr. Emo gets saved, Mrs. Emo trips and falls into a nail gun and promptly dies. So, will Mr. Emo either die next or end up at the bottom of the list? Place your bets, we're about to find out. But before we do, Wendy finally realizes who the other 2 people on the roller coaster were, namely her sister and her sister's best friend. But they would go right before Kevin on the list, and so they should therefore be up next. Kevin is working at a fair. He's working security, which seems very dumb. There's like fireworks and dangerous stuff everywhere around them. But anyway, at this fair is also Wendy's sister and Wendy's sister's friend. And a horse gets scared by some fireworks and starts running away. And there's a rope attached to the horse that gets caught around the sister's neck somehow. And she is now being dragged all over this place. And people are trying to stop the horse, but they can't. Until Kevin cuts the rope, saving the life of the sister, but instead the sister's friend dies. So this means that there are now 2 people skipped on the list, and the same as for Mr. Emo goes here. Several things could happen here. Is it gonna circle back, or are the 2 of these gonna end up down here? I mean, the fact that it seems like it was going for the sister indicates one thing, but at the same time, remember how in the first film, when Clear Rivers was in the car and it wasn't her turn, but it was still like Death was trying to kill her, maybe this again is also just like a freak coincidence that she and, you know, so we don't really know. We'll find out, I'm sure. But it doesn't really stop there, because following this, Wendy saves the life of Kevin, which now puts him on the 2-timer list as well. And I don't know what that means, so let's find out. Mr. Emo then comes back with a gun. He wants to kill Wendy because he is convinced of his theory that Wendy, being the last person on the list, if she dies, everyone else will be safe, okay? And then Mr. Emo dies. So this proves my theory. This proves that Death checks back in between the kills, getting the person who was skipped before moving on to the next person on the list. Fucking nice. There's a logic here. However, what does this mean for the rest of the 2-timers? Is Death gonna stay here and finish off all of the ones that survived that shouldn't have survived before? Or does it go back to the original list now and then check back to the 2-timers in between every main list entry? Are you following this at all? Well, I for one am very stoked to find out, because things are finally making sense, and oops, it is now time for the epilogue. It's been 5 months and Wendy has moved to a new city. She's on the train, everything's going good, until she starts seeing these weird signs everywhere. Following this, her sister comes into the train. She didn't even know that her sister was in town. And wait, hold on, who's that sitting right there? It's Kevin. The train then crashes, killing the sister, and then Kevin, and finally Wendy. Did they do it? I think they did it. I think they actually managed to make sense, because the sister and then Kevin and then Wendy, that's the order of the ones that were still alive on the list. That's insane. It took them 3 movies and me putting all this time in to make sense out of everything going on to understand it, but I think it kind of makes sense. Well, color me impressed. I didn't think any of them would make sense. Let's take a quick little break before we return. We still have 2 movies to go, because despite of the titles, none of these destinations seem very final. Roll the tape.
Still don't have any sponsors on my channel. The best way to support the content is through Patreon still, because I'm not making any money from this YouTube channel. Josh!
So it's a new day and look, Amazon delivered on the thing I specifically ordered for this video. A better board. Don't worry though, because the rules are still on the flimsy shitty one, and that's just hiding behind here until we need it. So the third one turned out to be surprisingly coherent. Therefore, I'm very excited to move things along to the final destination. Yeah. This dude, Nick, is at the racetracks with his asshole friend Hunt, his girlfriend Lori, and girlfriend's friend Janet. They of course are surrounded by quite a few people that may or may not become important to the plot, but we'll get to them because first, things are about to get just a little bit wacky around here. This seemingly normal day at the racetrack unfortunately turns into utter chaos when a huge accident happens. Yeah. Who would have thunk? A screwdriver lands on the tracks and it's a huge chain reaction of chaos, and since you know how this works by now, here's who die and the order they die in. Cool girl gets hit in the head with a tire. Racist man and racist girlfriend get cut in half. Tampon mom gets crushed by a flying car engine. By the way, I call her Tampon mom because her character is introduced in a scene where she shoves tampons in the ears of her kids. Cool man gets a stick through his head. Cowboy man gets crushed by a burning car. Oops, well. Hunt and Janet get crushed at the same time by some falling rocks. And Lori and security guard go up in flames at the same time as well. And then there's Nick, which maybe I forgot to print Nick. Good thing we got this new board. Okay, don't judge me. I'm writing this sideways. Just, okay. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention Nick gets impaled. But snap back to reality. Oop, there goes gravity. Oh, there goes Rabbit. He's choked. He's so mad, but he won't give up that easy. No, he won't have it. Fuck. But he won't give up that easy. Nope. So Nick gets him. He's so mad, but he won't give up that easy. Nope. So Nick gets himself and his friends out along with some other folks. When they're outside of the stadium, the crash happens in there, and a tire comes flying and kills the cool girl. And two things about this right off the bat. One, I'm very glad we're not working backwards. Two, is it just a freak coincidence that she dies by a tire in the premonition and dies by a tire here as well? There's been some connections between the way people die in the premonitions and how they die in actual life in the previous films, but like this is very specific. I'm not gonna obviously like put up a rule for this, but I don't know what this means. Also, I realized just now, there was no premonition warning her, giving her a chance to survive like everyone else. Justice for Cool Girl and Billy, who both had no chance. Anyway, Racist Man wants to go inside the stadium to save his girlfriend, but security guard holds him back and thus Racist girlfriend dies. Now let me get the red death bars and let's get through this movie. Also, a death bar sounds like something you go to on a Star Wars planet. What are the drugs called in Star Wars? Like death sticks? What if we just called it, you know, death smoke or death powder? I think a lot of less people would do drugs. What are we doing here? Racist Man shows up at the house of security guard. He's there with a big cross to put up in security guard's front yard to light it on fire, because that makes sense. He's a racist character, right? His car or truck, I guess, starts rolling down the street and his leg gets caught on the back of it. He's getting pulled behind, there's gasoline on the ground, there's some sparks, and then he catches fire, and then he explodes and his head lands in front of the security guard. Good riddance. Hope you rest uneasy, Racist Man. Now, Racist Man was supposed to die before Racist Girlfriend, who, by the way, I don't know if she's racist. She's just dating a racist, so I'm assuming she is. We don't get much of a character arc on her. But him surviving until now kind of already proves that death missed him, and before continuing down the list has gone back to, you know, get this guy off the list. But, I mean, at this point,
Please don't try and make sense out of this. You do not want to join my suffering. Just lean back, point, and laugh at the fact that I'm putting myself through this. Do not join me.
Tampon Mom goes to get a haircut. She almost explodes, then she almost slips, then she almost gets crushed by a ceiling fan, but ultimately she falls victim to a stone going through a lawnmower and then through, well, her head. There. Nick and the gang figures that they should probably try and save whoever is next, and so they go to Cool Guy's workplace, which is a cool motor workshop. They fail to convince him that Death is after them, and then Cool Guy gets launched into a fence, kinda like dicing up his back. It's honestly kinda sick. Kinda regretting that I used up the rest in pieces joke already. Next up on the list is Hunt and Janet, and if you remember they died at the same time, and now Nick is getting little hints or premonitions about water. Hunt is at a pool being an absolute stud, and Janet is going to wash her car. Hunt dives into the pool and gets his ass stuck on the pool drain that's been turned up to maximum overdrive, and Janet gets stuck in the car wash as her car fills with water. This is happening at the same time, so we're sitting there wondering, oh, is she gonna die? Is he gonna die? Are they both gonna die? But there's no point in wondering because there's no logic here. But eventually, Hunt's insides get sucked out through his ass and he dies. Janet, in the meantime, gets saved by Nick and Lori, and ladies and gentlemen, that means that we're back to the age-old question: what will happen when someone gets saved? Personally, I'd like to think that even though Hunt and Janet got crushed under the same rock, they presumably didn't die at the exact same millisecond, and therefore one of them should be before the other one, so they don't actually know who of them died first, which could have been a cool mystery thing. Like, it could have been a plot device that the characters don't know whether or not one person has been skipped yet. But no, that's not the case. Every character just buys that these two must have died at the exact same time. So let's just do like all of the characters and accept that as the truth, meaning that Janet now got saved. So will Death now move down to Lori and then go back to Janet, or down to security guard and then go back to Janet, or will it finish all of these people off and then get back to Janet, or will Janet be at the bottom of the list and then the list... You get it by now. The next on the list are also two people, but everyone seems just sure that next up is supposed to be the security guard. I don't know what the difference is, but go along with it. Thing is though, security guard, he is fine with this. In a vague attempt to give him some character depth and backstory, it turns out that a few years ago he accidentally killed his whole family in a drunk driving accident, and therefore, you know, he's ready to join them or something. So he tries to off himself, he tries to shoot himself, he tries to hang himself, but uh-oh, looks like someone forgot a rule. You don't get to make that decision. So, what do the characters do? Well, of course, they immediately start celebrating. Because their logical conclusion to the fact that this guy can't die is that Death has given up. They're saying if this guy can't die, then we're fine. Death is done with us. Everything's back to normal. Can I just say that this might be the dumbest conclusion that they could have possibly come to from this. Like, this might be the dumbest moment in the entire franchise. They start celebrating with wine in the kitchen, and the security guard who was just trying to kill himself goes like,
"So what are you gonna do now?"
And what are they? Lori and Nick are like,
I think we're gonna go travel the world.
and they're like drinking champagne. I'm sorry, since when is it normal that you are apparently invincible now? Because that's what they're saying, right? They're saying that they're invincible now, and that means, you know, Death isn't after them anymore. The implications here are they're like,
Well, better go traveling, because we're gonna be walking the earth for eternities at this point. Thousands and millions of years from now, I will be looking back at this day, wishing that our immortal existence would one day end and that we would have taken the chance when we still could. But being a timeless being in the void of space after the destruction of Earth also has its perks.
I don't know. But their celebration get interrupted by an emergency news report. Apparently they found another survivor in the rubble at the stadium. Cowboy Man. He's alive. So with Cowboy Man being alive, all the characters go, oh no, he's next. Except that in the premonition, I think he's supposed to go here. Right in between Cool Man and Hunt and Janet. So what should happen now is that after Death has successfully killed off Hunt, which he has, he should go back to Cowboy Man, then go back to Janet, then get Lori and security guard at the same time, and then end it all off with Nick. So they go to the hospital, and for the love of God, stop going where Death goes next. Stop like actively looking for a way to die if your goal is to not die. But anyway, they go to the hospital and Cowboy Man gets crushed by a bathtub. Rest in peace, you were a mediocre plot device at best. And then outside of the hospital, Mr. Security Guard gets run over by an ambulance. Why? Why did he die now? He's supposed to die with Lori. I want to die now. Can I be next on the list? Laurie and Janet are going to a movie theater because apparently they're pretty chill about the whole situation. Nick then has a vision that the movie theater is going to blow up. Nick goes there and manages to get Laurie out of the theater, but Janet stays and she dies. And leaving the theater, Laurie gets her leg stuck in an escalator and also dies, except plot twist. Shouldn't have done that. That was all just a vision, and we're back to right before Mr. Security Guard dies. However, he still dies right away. Nick comes back to reality right as Mr. Security Guard dies. So, rest in peace. This time Nick knows that if he goes in to save his girlfriend, she's just gonna get crushed in an escalator, and also I guess everyone else in the movie theater dies, but they never mentioned that once. But what he does instead is that he goes into the back of the theater to stop the explosion. Hey, you can be here, but they need to see me. I don't know where I was, but Nick goes into the back of the theater to stop the explosion, and he gets nailed to a wall by a nail gun, and a fire starts, but he still manages to stop the explosion and save everyone. Time for a happy ending. So 2 weeks later, the survivors, also known as Nick, Laurie, and Janet, are celebrating that they made it, because again, that makes total sense. They're sitting in a cafe when Nick suddenly gets a spooky feeling, and then a truck just bursts in through the window, killing all three of them at the same time. The other camera has died, so I can't show you a close-up, but just imagine that and then my cat is in the way, but just imagine that I'm striking out Janet, Laurie, and Nick at the same time. She just took one of the little death strips and walked off with it. At this point, I find myself thinking back to my original 3 questions, and so far I can only answer one of them, that being the third one, aka, are these movies any good? And to be totally honest with you, I'm kind of surprised that I'm saying this, but I don't really think they are. I remember seeing the second Final Destination specifically as a kid. It was one of those movies that was always on TV, and everyone had a VHS of it for some reason. But looking at them like in a row like this, it really is like at most vaguely entertaining. Like, I didn't go into this expecting masterpieces, and perhaps it's because of the fact that not a single character is neither relatable or interesting, or maybe it's the fact that I've spent an insane amount of time just rewatching and taking notes. But honestly, it's just not very good. I'm not having a very good time watching through these movies, to be completely honest. But I digress, because there's still one to go, and my only hope at this point is that this last one will somehow save it and bring something new, but my hopes are not high, so let's see how it plays out. Hey baby, can you make everyone like my video? What's that? Did you just say that everyone should subscribe? That's crazy. Her words, not mine. So here we are, Final Destination 5, or as I like to call it, The Final Destination 2. After an admittedly cooler title sequence than the other films, we get introduced to the characters and the general setting, so let's summarize. This is Sam. Sam is working at a paper company, and he is dating this girl, Molly. Sam's best friend, and also I think his boss, is Peter. And Peter, he's dating the intern, Candice. There's also a cool girl, and her name is Olivia. And then there's the token gross and funny guy, Isaac. There's the big boss manager of the company, and it's this guy, Dennis. And then there's Nathan, the only non-white character in this film, unless you count the sexualized Asian women and the hilariously non-sexualized Asian woman at the Asian massage parlor, but I'm getting ahead of myself, we'll get there. As you may have already noticed, I'm giving a little bit more of story context for this one, and that's just so that you'll understand, because there's some fuckiness going on here. So, this guy Nathan is in charge of the factory workers at the paper company, and the union rep of the factory workers is this guy, Roy, and he doesn't like Nathan. Now, as always, you don't have to remember any of these names, I've given them nicknames. We've got the guy, best friend, girlfriend, cool girl, intern, gross man, boss man, and Nathan. So at this company, it's a paper company with a bunch of offices on top, and then on the bottom floor is like the factory, and Again, this guy works as a boss, and the main factory worker guy is named Roy. Remind you of anything you've seen. They're all on a bus to go on a company retreat. Construction workers are doing their absolute best to turn this bridge into a death trap, and it turns out they succeed. Candace goes first, falling off the bridge and landing perfectly on a boat sail. The bus then falls over the edge, and funny sleazebag man comes out of the bathroom where he presumably took a hilarious big old stinking poop right before this, and he dies when the bus hits the water. Cool girl isn't as cool as we initially thought, because it turns out she has these big old nerd glasses, so she loses those and can't see anything and falls off the bridge, but she survives until a car lands on her and she doesn't survive. Now I just realized that I had written all the names in the wrong order, but I corrected it, and through video editing you didn't have to see any of it. This is the correct order, so let's get back to how they die. After Cool Girl, it's time for Nathan. He gets whipped by a cable or something, and after that is Boss Man, who gets cooked alive in oil and then falls to his death. Best Friend gets a bunch of metal rods through him, and the main guy gets sliced in half. End of premonition. Weird that the girlfriend didn't die. I wonder how that'll play into the story. By the way, remember how in the first film, the, initial death of everyone was kind of normal? Okay, a plane exploding maybe isn't normal, but it's feasible, right? And everyone on the plane died at about the same time in the same explosion. And then it isn't until after they manage to survive that death needs to do these very elaborate deaths to get them. Now it's just they immediately fall off the bridge and perfectly land on the sail rod of a boat, or get sliced in half by a metal sheet, or get rods all through their bodies. Isn't this just supposed to be their normal death, how they were supposed to die? Why do they die so gruesomely? Not really a plot hole, more just it feels like they've kind of lost track of what these movies are supposed to be about. But anyway, some stuff happens, there's some cops who are confused, there's a funeral, and then this guy, he's back, fucking, what's his name? The coroner, he's back again. And he's saying a bunch of cryptic things. Anyway, let's get to the list. I'm not sure if you can actually see it, but first up should be the intern. She's a gymnast, and we get this very long, drawn-out scene, probably the best in the entire franchise, of just everything that's going wrong around here, slowly building towards her death. But the quick version is like this. A screw falls from a fan onto this pole, intern avoids it and goes to the swingy bars. Another gymnast then steps on the nail and falls into this powder that ends up in front of a fan that blows it onto the intern, who loses her grip and then just fucking folds in half. Next up is the gross man. He goes to a massage parlor with gross intentions, like the prophecy foretold, and he gets needles in his skin. Then a fire breaks out and he rolls off the bed and gets impaled by said needles, after which a Buddha statue crushes his head. And I'm really trying to not be too slow here, but I know, I'll try to speed it up a little bit. The main crew meets the coroner. He tells them that they can, save themselves by taking another life instead of their own, and then the main guy Wait, hold on. They can be saved by taking another life instead of their own? Huh. Is that really it? Is that what we've been waiting for? I mean, I guess there hasn't been any scenes where any of the characters actively kill another character, has there? I mean, surely someone must have. Okay, let's just put that on the rule board. I'll just write it by hand here. Kill someone else to save yourself, I guess. Okay, so best friend now gets pissed off at main guy because main guy saved the girlfriend in the premonition but didn't save him, and I think we can see where this is going. Also, I'm really losing it for this last one. I forget to even strike these people out. Sleazebag and intern are both dead. And next up is Cool Girl. Now, Cool Girl is having LASIK done because she doesn't want to have her nerdy glasses anymore. And just like with all electric equipment in this franchise, water makes it stronger. And a broken water machine triggers the laser to literally burn a hole into her head and hand, after which she does manage to get up, but she trips and falls out the window. rest in peace. Next up is Nathan. Nathan is currently fighting with his arch nemesis Roy, and he notices that there's like a hook coming for them, so he tries to save Roy, but he accidentally does the opposite and pushes Roy to his death. Interesting. Quickly after Roy dies, Boss Man comes in to see what's going on and immediately gets a wrench through his head, killing him, and holy shit, I think we might have actually done it. Look, Nathan wasn't saved in any way. Nathan just offered up someone else's life, and now death has moved on to the next person. So I am just gonna erase Nathan and put him outside of the list over here. So moving on with the list, the main guy and his girlfriend is having a romantic dinner in the middle of all of their friends and colleagues dying, but the best friend comes and interrupts them. And as we know, best friend is the next that is supposed to die. And he tells them that he's been intending to kill a random person to save his own skin, but he couldn't go through with it. Instead, however, he intends to kill the girlfriend. And the reason he wants to do that is that because in the premonition, the intern, aka the best friend's girlfriend, she died, but the main guy's girlfriend didn't die, and he thinks that's unfair, even though that situation never happened. So yeah, he's decided to kill the girlfriend to save his own skin. And can I just say, best friend? More like worst friend? Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. So he starts chasing them around with a pistol, but then Mr. Cop shows up. Yeah, sorry, there's a Mr. Cop, but he's not on the list. It's just the subplots that I didn't mention, but it doesn't really matter because worst friend immediately shoots him and he dies. But that's good, right? Because now best friend doesn't have to kill girlfriend. No. There's a reason his name is worst friend. No, he needs to kill the girlfriend because she's now a witness, obviously. So there's some more chasing around, and then eventually the main guy kills the best friend. This should now mean that main guy is also off the list to the side with Nathan. And if this is in fact true, because the coroner, Mr. Deathman, he specifically said that it was, so if this is actually true, it took 5 movies, and in the last movie of the franchise, as of right now, we finally fucking figured out how to cheat death. You kill someone else. This might be like the one most important rule, presumably. Okay, so before we jump to any conclusions, let's watch the epilogue. It's 2 weeks later, because of course it is. The main guy and girlfriend are going away on a trip to celebrate their survival because, of course they are. They board their plane to Paris, and then they see some guy and he's screaming something about a bunch of terrible things that are gonna happen. So they sit down and the flight takes off, and we see their ticket, and it's flight 180 to Paris. Like the first film. Remember? I actually really like that. Turns out this whole movie is a prequel, and it all takes place in like 99, and they've just been very subtle about not showing too much tech or clothing that might give away when it is. But if you look closely earlier in the movie, there's like this voucher for the massage parlor, and it says that that expires in like 99 or something. So yeah, honestly, that's really cool. It's a breath of fresh air. Wait, hold on. We know this plane is gonna go down. So then what the fuck is the deal with the killing someone rule? Because now the main guy is gonna die unless... Okay, wait, no, we can save this. I think I see where this is going. So, main guy, right? He killed best friend, but best friend was already supposed to die because he was on the list, so that doesn't count. So let's put him back on the board. And girlfriend is unfortunately just collateral, just like everyone else on the plane. And that should make everything make sense, because obviously you can't just kill someone who's already on death's list. Whew, got a little bit worried there for a second. Let's continue. Nathan is like at a wake or something for Roy, the guy who he killed. Kind of weird to be there, but okay. So as he's standing there, another factory worker or something comes up to him and says something about Roy's cancer, which makes Nathan go, huh? And it turns out that, yeah, in the autopsy report, they found out that Roy was just full of cancer, and he was gonna die any day now, which might not be so good for Nathan. And yeah, it turns out that it isn't, because one of the engines from the airplane just fell off and it crashes through the roof, killing Nathan. The end. So then what does it mean? That's all. That's all the movies. You can't kill someone who's already on death's list. Isn't everyone on death's list? This guy, you, me, everyone is on death's list, so this means nothing. And why did it wait to kill Nathan until the end? That's not the sheet, right? Oh yeah, you can just kill someone else to end up at the bottom of the list. None of this makes any fucking sort of sense.
What happened? Oh, I just had the craziest dream or something. I dreamt that I was watching these multi-million-dollar productions, a whole franchise of them, and almost not a single writer cared to make any of it make any sort of sense. Also, didn't I used to have a beard? Wah. Oh, my cat is getting so bothered by me screaming. Usually I record a little video clip for the end of these videos, but honestly, I want to get this thing out. You'll have to settle for an audio this time. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this at any point, do all of the YouTube things. Obliterate that like button, hit the subscribe thing, the notification bell, the share button. Send it to your grandma. She'll fucking love this video. And please consider supporting me on Patreon. It's fun to support independent artists. Just ask these folks. We got Aurora PK, Dave, Eddie Aranda, Fry, Georg Åström, Honey Weaver, Jess Hove, Joe Pauly, Mykol Neff, Michael, I was gonna say, Ross, Skellington Dragon, oh no, so sorry, Cho Hesse, It's Meg, Nat Franklin, Nia, Flipside, and Gustav. Thank you so much for watching once again, and for sticking around all until the end. I'll let you in on a little secret. My next video will be about farts. See ya!